Welcome to Mental Health Dumpster Fire, a podcast where therapists give their real opinions on mental health, relationships, parenting, and pop culture. Hosted by Courtney Laver, licensed clinical social worker, and Jess Miller, art therapist. You can follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Mental Health Dumpster Fire. Follow Courtney on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook at Laver Listens, and Jess on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook at The Artsy Brain. This podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only and cannot be substituted for therapy. We cannot provide you mental health services via this podcast or social media. We hope you enjoy the show. Don't forget to subscribe. We'll just start, I guess.
Yeah,
I don't know what to do now that we don't have an intro.
I know, it's weird.
I guess I'll just say hello.
We can introduce the guest, I guess.
Yes.
You can focus on the thing you're supposed to be focusing on.
Why are we here? What are we doing?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Hello, welcome to our show. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. We have a guest.
Hello.
Woo woo. Our second guest is Molly Fitz King. Tell us about yourself.
Yes. So, I am a therapist. I graduated in 2017 with my master's, but I entered the field through like paraprofessional work in the School for Autism in 2011. So I started off in like the autism world, and then that school doesn't exist anymore, but then once I graduated, I moved really deeply into like substance abuse and worked in rehabs for like the first few years.
Wow, okay.
And then I went to a lot of funerals, a lot of people died, and I really struggled with that aspect of it because I witnessed like all these thousands of ways places could be doing better, and there's corrupt organizations, there's the insurance corruption, and then there's just the these like very strange myths about the use disorder world, and so I wrote a play about it.
So cool.
And the play was called Asking Toddlers to Do Algebra, and that was a huge, much bigger undertaking than I could have ever imagined, but that did go to production on July 25th. And I've been asked a lot recently, when are you taking this to the steps of Frankfurt, and like when are you producing it again? And I want to show up. This is going to sound so selfish, but I swear, I want to show up as a true playwright and just hand the script over. Because, and a lot of times for first-time playwrights, you are at all rehearsals and you are like in charge of more fundraising and stuff. And that was the reality of the first showing. Totally fine. But I do have this sense that if I were to do, they call it guerrilla theater, which is where you storm the steps.
Yeah.
Not like the January 6th, a different type of, it's benevolent. It's very benevolent.
Yes.
But you rush on in with your actors and you know what I mean? And
yeah.
And I so would love for that to happen. I just know myself, and I know that I don't have another fundraiser in me, and that I have to. When people were like, "Well, what's next with Braxton's Bill and the play and all these things?" I was like, "Well, what's next is a lot of naps, cooking class with my dad, and walks with my dog."
Yeah, self-care is what's next.
Yes. So anyway, that was a really long intro, but my main population from a working perspective, like outside of like the volunteer stuff that I do, is autism. And in a perfect world, I would love just kind of a full autistic caseload because it's become such a niche. But of course, that's not really how it works. There's still a smattering of like other things that like depression, anxiety, PTSD that end up being a huge part of the practice as well, which is totally fine. But what I love about working with autistic people is that when you talk to them and have open and honest conversations about work-life balance and the importance of like the 24-hour no-show, cancellation, all of that, my experience has been that is respected so much more because so often, I don't want to generalize, you've given me a rule, like that shows up. They show up. They're so much more reliable in my experience. And I don't want to say they in any kind of stereotyping way, even though I guess in some ways you could accuse me of that. But I have had that experience of like they know how they want to be treated, and autistic people treat me the way that I don't really always experience that in other populations. I don't experience that level of understanding of how important work-life balance is. And I've had clients too where they're like, I need you to tell me when the session's over, because I'll just keep talking. I need you to be like, okay, it's time to go home. And I like that. I like that there's not all these, like, this weird guesswork that shows up when you're in other settings. And the very, very first thing that I say to anyone that comes in, because most of them have seen how much neurodivergence is like a niche of mine, I say, so before you even sit down, sitting down is not a requirement. You can stand, you can pace, you can fidget, you can sit on the floor, you can lay down. Eye contact is not a requirement. I'm not going to give a whole lot of eye contact with you unless that's something that you want, because eye contact is just not a weird thing that I expect of everyone all the time. Right. And then just like all these other kind of typical things that people might struggle with. And I have so often watched clients just melt onto the floor, and you know what I mean? Because now they don't have these weird social expectations and rules it's just, this is a space where we're neurodivergent friendly. We don't need any of that. Yeah. So I really distracted myself.
No, that's okay. This is fantastic. This is honestly how the podcast goes.
Good. So. If you want a rambler, like, always call me. Somebody who's going to just ramble. My other favorite first question, because I do love this, is what all have you tried, both with a clinician and on your own, that has not worked? List it out to me. And then I'll be like, we're not in here to bash your previous therapist. I'm not trying to get the dirt on who you don't even have to tell me who it was. But if you were creeped out by EMDR, or if you were, which some people report that. I'm not saying anything in particular, but if you had these certain experiences, if you felt like the therapist was just always on you about a certain thing that you're like, I know that you want me to do that, but it's just really not my jam. Yeah. I want to know that going into it. And sometimes it's weird, because in order to fully ask that question, because it is such I had to actually help them understand what I'm looking for. So I'm like, they'll be like, I don't know. I know that it wasn't working, but I can't really tell you why it wasn't working. And I was like, well, were you getting a lot of worksheets that felt like homework from a school teacher? Were you getting a lot of, because some people love that and some people don't. Yeah. Were you getting, were you feeling scolded, or were you were you feeling that there wasn't enough personal disclosure? Was there too much? And sometimes once you give like 100 examples, they're like, oh, that's what it was.
Yeah, you know? And then they think of other things too.
Yeah, and then they're like, and I had this one therapist when I was a kid who told my mom everything, and I was like, okay, well, I'm not telling her anything anymore. So yeah, those are the two. I don't mess with all the crazy other intake questions anymore now that I'm not responsible to an insurance company. I really focus on those two things. How do I make this a neurodivergent friendly space? Give me a little backstory, and then I guess the final thing of what do you know doesn't work?
Yeah, I ask that question too, because I see a lot of like foster kids who have had 30,000 therapists before, and so I always start with like, what did you like about past therapists? What did you not like about past therapists, so that I don't make the same mistakes and treat you in a way that you don't want to be treated, and then feel like, oh, this is just how therapy is.
Sensory modulation. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because that's something that I personally am really interested in, and I think is something that most people don't know what it means, and then once it's explained, they're like, oh, that makes sense. Kind of a thing.
So I think when people hear about sensory modulation, they just think about sight, smell, taste, touch. But sensory modulation really incorporates these three other senses. And I know you said we don't use big words, so I'm going to like really try to, or we don't use big words that we don't define. We don't just like throw them out and not explain them. So there's the regular 5, but then in sensory modulation, we think of 8 senses. So the other 3 are interoception, which is like what's inside my body. So that's like how I know I need to pee, I know I need to poop, I know I need to drink water, or how I know like, oh, my stomach just dropped because that person reminded me of something dumb I did when I was in 8th grade.
Yeah,
or something, you know what I mean?
yeah.
And that's interoception, that you know that your stomach responded, you responded inside your body to something that happened outside of your body. That didn't even touch you physically. So that's interoception. And then proprioception is push-pull. So if you open a heavy door, if you do a push-up, and a lot of times I have the mom and the dad come in and they push the hands of the kids and they get some proprioception and they learn how to give their kid that pressure. I think some people could argue that this is not proprioception, but like patting on a kid's back when they're having a meltdown and even to a beat that they really like, or a song or a Pokemon thing, whatever. Pokemon recording, I don't even know, but like something that's within their like interest realm.
Yeah.
So so then the last one, the last one is vestibular, and that's like balance and challenge to balance. So that could be where you see kids with autism or adults with autism who are like standing on one foot, but if you can generalize that out to the whole population of humankind, we kind of do, we regulate our nervous systems by that as well. We might not spin in circles, but as soon as anyone gets in a rolly chair, what do? They do some spinning. Whether you're neurodivergent or not, you're gonna get something nervous system wise from that spinning. So and then there's some people who hate that too, so that's important to acknowledge. But the whole point of sensory modulation is using those 8 senses and finding multiple things to do throughout the whole entire day that is helping you stay regulated and helping you check in with those. And the only way to do it that's like sustainable from what I've experienced is to have each of those activities be something that feels useful to you and that like inserts into your life. So am I really gonna just drop everything and do 10 push-ups? You know what I like? Yeah. So we have a billion different modifications for like how do I make this realistic for you? Because you're doing it so often. And I have a sensory diet, I have lots of different things. They go back and forth between calling it sensory diet and sensory modulation. Yeah. But there's a whole host of things that I do and that I will model, whether we're talking about sensory modulation or not. I'm showing up that way, and I feel like that is something that helps me break the ice around being able to use those.
Yeah, that's something that I work with a lot of neurodivergent kiddos, and that's something that I always like up front is like I'm gonna be authentic to my own sensory needs so that they are more comfortable being authentic to theirs. And so like if I need to bounce on a yoga ball, I'm gonna bounce on a yoga ball or whatever that I need to do, and then modeling it for them, but also being like, ooh, I'm feeling this way, I'm gonna do this, because they have almost like the instinct that they need to bounce or whatever it is, but they don't have the words to self-advocate for it. So by me narrating what I'm doing, that's providing some like advocacy language for them.
Yes.
Yeah. Being authentic as a human and a therapist, I feel like is something that people don't expect, but is like key to building a therapeutic relationship.
I think it's also relatively new. I'm not saying it's entirely new, but I mean, if you just think about the movie Good Will Hunting, when he goes and he sees the gay therapist, he was completely in the closet. And I mean, a lot of gay therapists, I don't know a gay therapist that's in the closet personally. I don't. Fair. And that I think that that's such a great example of like progress that we've had, where therapists get the opportunity to show up more as people. We're not telling you all our business, but we're not trying to gatekeep who we are.
Right. Yeah. I'm not going to dress in like a business suit. That's not what I want to wear. I obviously dye my hair wild colors because I think it's fun and I love it. Yeah. And I usually wear t-shirt and jeans to work. Like, I work with kids. What am I supposed to do? Like, but yeah, being just truly being authentic in the therapy room is something that they don't like teach in grad school either. So then when you like are in grad school and you're daydreaming about being a therapist, you don't think of that kind of stuff. You think more of the like wearing a suit.
They kind of teach you the opposite in grad school.
Yeah, like the whole thing of like don't hand them a tissue or whatever.
Oh,
or yeah, I'm like, here you go, you got a booger or whatever.
Yeah.
Or like I just point where the tissues are, but like I'm not gonna let them sit there and cry without a tissue.
Yeah,
That seems worse to me. But yeah, that's the stuff they teach you in grad school, or I guess don't teach. I don't know. They just let you assume, I guess. It's so weird.
Well, and while I entirely agree, I have seen like the other side of that, which I think about this all the time, like ping-ponging back. It's kind of miserable sometimes. I'd be doing this too much. But I did go to funerals like quite a bit when I worked in CLS for like special needs people, because you know, the life expectancy is lower for Down syndrome. It's way higher than it was in the 90s.
Yeah.
But they still kind of die in their 50s and 60s. And so what I did see a lot was staff that were taking the other clients to the funerals, and then when they would just burst into these like really loud, they would, you know, wailing tears and stuff, there's shh, stop, like, and shoving tissues in their face, and just this like, stop it. And what is so important to understand is, like, those people were their everything. Like, they went to program together. They, you know what I mean? Like, they had such a bond, and I don't know. I would just never tell someone to stop crying at a funeral.
Yeah.
Right.
And I don't think that that's what you're saying, but I think I think of that other piece of sometimes when you do shove a bunch of tissues in someone's face, there can be a sense of a message of, stop. Right. But I don't think that that's what that intention. I think that it's a weird way to think of supplying tissues to someone.
And
So weird.
And in that situation at a funeral like that, it's because the person that's not wailing and crying is uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And they want the other person to be quieter because it's making them uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And I think that's the key element of, like, I'm not pointing out where the tissues are, handing you a tissue in session because you're making me uncomfortable. I'm just like, I know it sucks to have a wet face and boogers coming out, so like here's a tissue for you.
It's just genuine, nice. I don't know. I think that there's a lot of assumptions of intention. I also think about having watched staff be like, shh, they're in a chapel and they're socialized of like, when you're in a chapel, you're supposed to be quiet, and so there's some of it that's like bigger than what the moment looks like from the outside too.
Yeah, and they have that like social understanding of like, well, this is what we're supposed to do, and like, what if we just let everybody be their authentic selves? And if you were at a funeral for a good friend, like, you're allowed to express yourself the way that you feel.
Yeah, because most of the time when I was at those funerals, there would be a man that had known everybody else at that day program for 3 or 4 decades. Most of them that they're dying in their 50s, but they got there in their teens or something. They're dying in their 60s, but they got there when they were in their, you know, so you would have, these other clients knew each other in a way. I mean, you might have only been working there for a year. You don't have like the context of that was like a sibling in a way. For them,
their entire lifetime, for the most part. Were you see it? You said you were doing CLS, community living service. That's cool. I did that for a while too.
It's fun. I mean, it's a really cool job, and you get to learn a whole lot about your city too, because you're driving them around everywhere. And you have to think, like, because they'll have their budget for the day too, and you're like, okay, what can we do for $20? Like, we're gonna try and do things that you like but are within your budget, and that's just like the life skills aspect of it and stuff. It's very interesting to go through all that stuff. And then I have a brother with disabilities. I have a brother with Down syndrome, so like growing up with that also made it really interesting being a community service person, because I wouldn't say used to, but like people would look at us weird growing up. And then when I was out with like advocating for the person I was working with, I'm like, stop staring. Go fuck
I was like, they can't talk for themselves or speak up for themselves, so I'm gonna do it. Stop staring at them. Yeah, I would get really mad. I still do.
Absolutely. Yeah, my cousin had CP, and I know there's a huge variety of how that shows up, but he wasn't able to like walk or talk. And I don't think he could digest either. So he had to have...
it impacts their swallowing muscles, yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so he had... I was really young throughout all of that. And I remember my cousin tried to feed him Cheerios through... Because she was upset that they kept giving him food that she didn't think looked good. Because it was... she was really, really young. And she was like, he needs Cheerios. But she was trying to feed him in his mouth. We had to like dish it out of his mouth because he couldn't eat that. But it was a cute gesture.
Yeah. She just wanted him to enjoy the experience of eating Cheerios.
It was really cute. And I think she was like 6 at the time. So she had no idea. I mean,
yeah.
It's adorable.
Your passion is autism and neurodivergent clients, but then your advocacy work is mostly focused on addiction. Is that correct? Because like you're like the play, and then Braxton's Bill is focused on addiction. Can you talk about the Braxton's Bill?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So, Braxton's Bill is like the weirdest accident, or at least I think of it that way sometimes, because as I was writing the play, there's this scene where they keep talking about this proposal, and so then it just became time to just, okay, well, let's see if we can make this proposal a thing. So the proposal was all about mandating Kentucky insurance companies, once everyone's done that whatever $10,000, $5,000 deductible, that then they're eligible for long-term care versus this 30 days in, get out, relapse, whatever. And the narrative is always like, well, why did she have to go to therapy or to rehab 15 times? That's always the story. And it's like, why isn't there another story of therapy wasn't built for success, or rehabs weren't really built on success. They were built on how to make it as cheap as possible. And actually, it's more expensive that way, because to detox is $2,500 a day. To pay more in partial hospitalization, which is what Braxton's Bill is asking for, is for more partial hospitalization days. That's $800 to $1,500 a day. So if you get it all over with, that's a lot less than if, let's say, the average person goes to rehab sometimes 20 times before they can maintain long-term recovery. You've spent so much. I'm not even good at math, and I can tell you that that's going to be way more money just based on how many times you have to go. Yeah. So, and it's just demoralizing because they feel like a failure, and they're already subjected to black and white thinking and brain damage from both the detox process. The stress of the detox process is so bad for like memory and all the things, and then the stress of, all of it. So it's about 6 months that we're looking for, but there is some aspect of ask for more than you think you're gonna get, like negotiation, whatever that's in that as well. But yeah, so that is 6 months total. So that would include detox, residential, partial hospitalization, and before they're even ready for intensive outpatient programming. And such a big part of the Braxton's Bill project really speaks to what you guys talked about earlier, where you were saying making mental health stuff accessible. So what happens in intensive outpatient programming, and I've talked about this so often, so I'm going to annoy the people that have heard this so many times from me, but we have this idea that we should just sit people in a classroom setting in intensive outpatient programming and like teach them on a whiteboard about dopamine, or about addiction, or about like how addictions happen and how you can use mindfulness and while that is great, they're bored and like they're not learning about nutrition, about how to like have healthy, sober hobbies, about exercising. And it's what the best way to do that is to do that like on campus with them. And I have been seen programs that incorporate that, but those programs get that extra funding whereby they can have not even just the extra funding to, you know, pay the therapist a living wage, which I find incredibly important, but also the extra amount of hours per day. If you're doing 3 hours per day, 3 days per week, you don't really have enough time to do, you know, grocery list checks and like let's cook a meal together. You don't really have as much time to do that. You do end up falling prey to the let's just sit in a classroom kind of setting. And that was throughout the whole play, that was mentioned like 4 or 5 times, was the sense of you're teaching people who have struggled with brain damage from the drugs and the alcohol that they've been taking, and you're teaching them about neuroscience. And can we have a conversation about how stupid that is?
Yeah. Can you explain for the people who may not know the difference between intensive outpatient and partial hospitalization?
Yeah, so intensive outpatient programming is 3 hours per day, 3 days per week, and partial hospitalization, kind of depending on how you run it, is 5 hours, 5 days per week. You could also do 5 hours, 3 days per week and just spread that out over depending on, I don't know, a myriad of different factors. But those difference in hours is so important because you're not going to really be able to accomplish as much. You're going to be pressured to really have a health and wellness curriculum. And that means you're going to go off campus. That means you're going to have them explore what it looks like to be in their community. Because we still have this, I talk about this a lot, but we still have this idea of, I'm either going to shove you into this very classroom-based setting and educate you to death and bore you to death. And actually, you know, you could die because you're probably, you leave at the 30-day mark, which is way before you're ready. Or I'm going to throw you into the forest. Have you guys heard of these, like, wilderness recovery things? Yeah. Which is, I resonate with this, like, nature is so great. Yeah. But you're still getting people out of community. You're still emphasizing, like, hey, go off, be elsewhere, and come back. And I think that that's important for the first 15 days. You do need to be separated from your environment because your environment is too triggering for you to handle. Yeah. And like you are your own worst enemy in those first 15 days. But after day 15 to 20, it's important that you don't keep thinking of yourself as this monster that needs to be secluded from human society. Yeah. And I don't know why I have to keep saying that. Yeah. I'm annoyed that I have to keep explaining that because we have such a strong culture around othering people in recovery, around hide them under a rock and like put them in a closet.
Yeah.
It's very stupid.
It is. And like what you're saying of like spending the first chunk maybe at some kind of like outdoor retreat or something for the first 15 days and then coming back and doing partial hospitalization, like that just feels like common sense to me. Like, why do we have to do all one or all the other? And why is it only 30 days? Like it,
and then 30 why days, are we surprised when they
relapse? When they come back? Yeah. Or they die. Why is that a surprise? Like, we're literally setting them up for failure in that kind of a system.
Well, what I think is interesting too is for Kentucky, the norm, even as recently as 2007, was 5 day stays. So we're really used to this idea of 30. But if I'm not mistaken, Obama had like a global federal negotiation of 90 because of all the research about, I don't know, you guys are probably familiar with all the research about the importance of the 90th day or whatever.
Yes, yeah.
But of course, as all negotiations go, there was that wiggle back to, okay, well, you asked for 90, so I'll give you 30. And that's not what happened to every single state. That's what happened to our state. So if you look at New Hampshire, you can get a year. If you look at Colorado, I think they have a 6-month programs here and there. And it also depends on if you're talking about private insurance, Medicaid, or private pay, which that's a huge variety among those 3 options. What's the other state that I pestered? I really pestered a lot of people throughout this process.
No, that's smart though, because if they're doing what you're trying to do, they're the best people to talk to about how to do it.
Oh,
that makes sense.
Yeah, but we went. So, the team is like my mom, Laura Graven, and myself. That's like the Braxtonsville team, and Laura Graven is Braxton's mom.
Cool.
So me and Laura went to interim session. Last interim, whichever one the most recent one was. And we spoke at the health committee, which was a really big deal for us because it was kind of this thing of, is Braxtonsville even going to go anywhere? You know, there's all this not getting returns on emails and whatever. Yeah. But then all of a sudden we got this email and they were like, we want you to come to interim session and talk about Braxtonsville. Like, what? That's so exciting. So we went, and for the first 2 hours, this judge, I think his name was Judge Mullins, he was thanking the senators and representatives for having covered this program that helps like women who have substance use disorder and they've given birth to children that also need services, and there was these extras, and that was all Medicaid. And there was a long term and that was like so perfect that we went after them because we're asking about private insurance. And so we were like, hey, did you see all that beautiful research that was already done before? Yeah. And all that's Medicaid, but like, shouldn't people also, if they're in their private insurance, shouldn't they have long-term too? Because then we would, and one of my biggest arguments was we would prevent more people from having to be on Medicaid. And I'm, of course, talking to a very Republican audience.
Yeah. So they like that.
Trying to like speak to the talking points that appeal to them, whatever. And I was supposed to be with my representative, Josie Raymond, and last minute they were like, your services aren't needed. And it was mostly because she was like a Democrat. So they sat me next to the insurance commissioner. So I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know this guy. And apparently his whole job is to like kill bills.
Cool.
Yeah.
No pressure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Intimidation.
Well, what ended up happening was like that didn't go. I'm trying to be really political in how I say this. That didn't go well for him because he had not done any research about Braxtonsville. He did not know what he was talking about. He said several things, and I was, excuse me, you're wrong.
Yeah.
I was trying to be like calm, but I would be like, excuse me, that's incorrect.
Yeah. No, good for you though, because they're not going to give you the time.
If you look at it at the end, when I figured out who he was, I looked like a 4-year-old at the end. I was like, because I was just like mean mugging him, but I was still being really professional, like with the words I was using. But I was like, in my mind, I'm like, I'm hiding this so well. And then I look at the video and I'm like, hit it not well at all. Like, not well at all. But that was I guess that was like relatively on brand for me. But yeah, the main thing was his discussion about fiscal impact was the fiscal impact of several bills that cost insurance companies more money, private insurance companies, more money last session. So this was like, when people have pancreatic cancer, they should have whatever the thing was. And I don't even remember what those bills were because I'm very narrowly focused on Braxtonsville.
Right, of course.
But he was like, oh, well, this is going to be really hard for those families of 4 whose premiums are going to have to go up. But he kept bringing up $25 per month, which that was not our fiscal impact. That was way not our, and he didn't even know what it was. And so I was reading his notes. Like, because I was close enough to him, and I was like, incorrect. It was a feisty, and there were so many more times I wanted to do that when I was like, maybe I need to like chill, but that was really hard for me. Like, that was a moment where I had to be like, I have all these things, all this frustration about how much you're talking about bills that are not Braxtonsville. You're talking about so many things, and you don't even know what partial hospitalization is. And my husband was explaining to me, he's like, Molly, they don't work in your industry. You can't expect, this is such a good point. This is why I married him. He was like, you can't walk around expecting people to know what you know about your industry. That is not his industry at all. That he didn't do his research, but none of the other senators or Republican or representatives knew what those terms meant either. Yeah. And so, not that my husband was like on that guy's side in any way, but he was like, he goes to the Capitol a lot with Dreams with Wings, and he's like, we always, they are amazing. We always have to educate them on the terminology because they just don't, they are not in that industry. So anyway, full circle. The interim session was a really, really, really big deal for us. It went really well, but the full story about where Braxton's bill is now is that because Representative Raymond is leaving office in December, we have to figure out where it's going to go after that. Like who's going to pick it up, what representative or whatever is going to. So we don't know.
Okay. So is that kind of on you to like figure out who that's supposed to be and then contact them and be like, hello, Braxton's bill?
I honestly don't know. I honestly don't know because this has been such a strange, that so much of what has happened has been like us, you know, what I think is so great about Representative Raymond is she's such a champion for, you have an issue, you hit the community, you get the support, you like, not that she's telling us to do her job, but she's like, she's got all these other things going on. And I wish there were more people who were willing to do that, because that made it so much easier for everybody involved. That because when, again, as my husband would say, they don't know the industry, so their ideas about what partial is and what's needed, and so that's such a magic point of partial hospitalization is around day 15, most use disorder clients that have bipolar or some other acute severe mental health issue are like, hey, I don't need these meds, these psych meds anymore. Let's get rid of all these psych meds now. Like, that sounds like a great idea. Let's do that. And sometimes they're on way too many and they actually do need to be taken. And then it's like, there was bananas that you put this person on 14 meds, right? But sometimes it's also such a ridiculous, it's such a bad idea for them to go off. Yeah. And when you have partial, you have a nurse that you have a relationship with. She's been taking your blood pressure every day. She's been taking your oxygen. She's been doing all these things with you, or he, whatever. And like, you trust her medically, whereas therapists can't really tell you what to do medically. Yeah. We could lose our license. Right. And the peer support is going to tell you, yeah, get off your meds. I'm off no meds and I'm doing great. And you're like, are you though? So that was mean. But the peer support a lot of times would encourage this like med-free lifestyle. And that's totally fine to an extent, if the nurse is also there to be like, hey, you're going to get brain zaps. You're like, if you don't do this tapered,
like, let's monitor.
The nurse is pivotal. I'm a big advocate. My mom's a nurse, so I guess I'm really biased in all of that. But the nurse is so pivotal for those medical, because you're not going to be seeing the doctor by day 15. You're completely medically cleared from, unless you're on, unless you're detoxing from like a really, really strong benzo addiction, you're probably not going to really be seeing the doctor a whole lot. And so that relationship with the nurse becomes so important, and you really lose that in intensive outpatient programming. I don't really know any IOPs that have a nurse.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, they have like a psychiatrist sometimes.
That's there twice a year.
Right, yeah.
Which I'm not trying to like hate on them, because I get that they have whatever. I'm just saying that that's the structure. The structure is that if you do have a psychiatrist, you're not seeing them very much as a client. Right. And that relationship with the nurse, I think, is really important for medication management in general.
Yeah,
right. Yeah. Well, and then even worse if you're going to like a 30-day rehab and then they're like, okay, go figure it out yourself. Now you have to find your own psychiatrist if you're not going to an IOP or a partial hospitalization. Like, now you have to form a new relationship with somebody new who doesn't know your history and could prescribe you whatever. And if you don't know what it is, then who knows where you're going to be. Yeah.
It's been interesting because I really don't know anything about the finer details of politics. Like, I really, really have learned it all from doing this. wellness. Mm-hmm. What I go into this knowing about is what I feel like is needed and what the research has indicated is needed in those spaces. Yeah. But I feel conflicted all the time because there's all these stories that you see on the news about sober living facilities and rehabs that are committing fraud and corrupt, and I don't want to enable them to have more funding to fraud more.
Yeah, but then you're not giving enough funding for the people who are doing it right.
Yes.
And I worked for a nonprofit recovery home. I was like the admin assistant, but it was awesome because it was small and it was community based, and the therapists were like, the office was in the home, so like they were just there 9 to 5 Monday through Friday with them, and they did IOP, and they had to go to NA meetings every day.
Is that Wellspring?
No, it was in New Orleans.
Oh, okay. I love Wellspring.
Yeah, but I loved that program, and it was 2 years, and it was awesome. But if there was just more of that, or like more like Wellspring, where it's just like fostering community, but also like giving you easy access to your nurses and your therapists and all of that stuff as you need it, and then helping them. They had like cooking classes, and they had yoga classes, and then they helped them get jobs, and made sure they like got they helped them make a savings account, and then at the end of their 2 years they matched it so that they could go and do whatever they needed to do after their 2 years. So it was awesome.
That's
awesome program.
Cool.
But yeah, I wish that they had more like that, and it was
it's so nice when it's so nice to hear. I need to keep hearing those stories.
Yeah, the places that are working and changing how it works.
Yeah. Well, and so the building that I work in, I am the a tenant for People Advocating Recovery, also known as PAR. And they're an education, training, advocacy, harm reduction, wellness. They do so many things, so I'm just going to list. But that's not even everything that they do. And they also fight for, to climb barriers that people have to receiving treatment. They also have widened what they do. It's not just use disorder, it's wellness. And, you know, I've been so educated by them just by virtue of eavesdropping. I mean, last week, one of them was talking about how brushing your teeth is harm reduction. And I love that. I mean, and then there's like the whole explanation of all these other aspects of wellness and harm reduction that we do on a daily basis that we don't think of, because when we think of harm reduction, we do think about Narcan and fentanyl test strips and all of the stuff that PAR does provide physically, but there's also exercise and diet and so many of the things I'm always talking about.
Right.
She's like, oh yeah, that's also harm reduction. What? It's awesome. So they are another community source that gives me a lot of hope, because I see them doing the right thing a lot, and I see them wagging their finger lovingly and sometimes not lovingly at people at organizations that are not following the NARS standards for sober living, halfway houses, and and they're big advocates for like, this is the basic standard, and we're gonna stand up for that. So that's so inspiring. And they'll even have stories of like places where they were like, hey, you're not allowed to do this and this and this and this and this, and you're doing this and this and this and this, and the place will come back having, in the matter of 6 months, having fixed all those areas, and with gratitude of like, this has actually made everything better, like, thanks for. So that wouldn't it be great if
you could also report on your annual reports like, hey, we helped this many more people because we improved our program.
No, and I think that's one of the things that's so hopeful too, is like, you do get to be around one of my friends would call this like benevolent dragons. She calls herself a benevolent dragon. Her name's Nicole. But yeah, she fights really, really hard, but she's not going to hurt anybody. Mm-hmm. She's fighting for rights. She's fighting for, advocacy. But yeah, it's really great to be sandwiched between two of them. So the person on the right side of my office, Melissa, is just a hardcore advocate, doesn't take any shit. Mm-hmm. And the person to my left is just a lioness for this community and for, health and wellness in general. And so it's great. I'm sandwiched between these really great, really, really, really hardcore advocates.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, that's cool.
And I love being in a place where I don't share. I like talking to you guys as therapists, but I like to be in a place where I'm around non-therapists.
Yeah.
Because then we just talk about pineapples and
yeah.
You know what I mean? And gophers and I don't know.
Yeah.
A cardinal bird that flew by. We're not having to talk about solution focused or
right.
Yeah.
You know, because I think we accidentally, when we're clinicians, and I'm so guilty of it too, but we accidentally talk too much about what we do, and we're already doing that so much with the clients that we're seeing, and so it's so fun to be able to be around people they are being lionesses about making sure that people are getting safe care. Mm-hmm. There's not body brokering and all this other weird stuff. They are being lionesses about that, but they're also just, again, talking about pineapples and
Yeah. Work-life balance.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be all the time.
Yeah. That's what I love about working in a school. I work in a school 1 day a week.
Oh, nice.
And it's so nice to just be around teacher people, and they're all very passionate about the subject that they teach too. So it's if I wanted to, I could pop into my neighbor teacher's classroom while he's having lunch and be like, hey, can you just tell me everything you know about elephants, because you're a biology teacher and I need something else to talk about right now. And he's like, sure, let's do it, let's go. And then I learn something, which I love doing, and then I just get to be around other people. I agree. Therapists tend to get around other therapists all the time, and it's nice to talk to other therapists, but at the same time, we're not talking about I don't know, the Kardashians or whatever stuff.
I don't want to talk about that.
No, I don't know anything about them except they maybe have too much money, but other than that, I don't know anything else.
Yeah, but it's a good example of just the regular small talk stuff, though. I think for sure. My friend's a third grade teacher, and last year, as I was opening my business and doing for the first time and doing Braxtonsville and this crazy play, she started to talk to me about how she was teaching. They had a whole curriculum for 2 months. I think it was 2 months. Maybe it wasn't that long. It was a long time period though. either that or some time period, still a lot, for just learning about different South African tree frogs. And I was like, can I just quit everything I'm doing and come to third grade and just learn about South African tree frogs? Because she was showing me pictures, and some of them looked I don't even know how that meets criteria for a frog, but it was just really, really cool. And I was like, I would love the break. I would just love to go to third grade and learn about frogs.
Yeah.
And leave all of this madness
behind.
It's
I don't I had clients trauma dump on me all day long, and that's part of my job, and I love it. But then sometimes I'm can you just teach me how to bake focaccia bread? Or yes. I just need that as my self-care, is other people teaching me their passions. I'm let's do it.
Yeah.
Please teach me. I love that so much.
It gives me when I'm learning about other people's passions and they're so excited about it, gives me the ASMR tinglies.
Yeah.
My brain sparkles, that's what I call it.
Oh yeah. I have a new thing that I'm kind of trying out too, where when it comes to meeting people for the first time, or even in a workplace setting where new people might be coming around or whatever, telling them to make sure they ask for consent before coming and venting to me or coming and asking me a lot of like, so yeah, just ask for consent, because they'll be like, hey, can I come into your room like whenever you are like not working and like telling me you all my problems? And I'm like, absolutely not. I mean, you should always ask for consent, and like educating them on that aspect of it that's so much better than like then getting all flustered on the back end and being like, well, I couldn't get you to leave or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, because everybody vents and that's totally fine, but I don't really let a lot of random people vent to me. I just don't, because of what I do. I find it really important that I will, and my close friends, they don't really vent a whole lot to me. I'm not saying that that's an unavailable thing, but they have always naturally asked for consent. Like, hey, did you have a day where, you know, you saw 6 people and 3 of them are incredibly suicidal and going to potentially be hospitalized, and the other 3 have like acute tragedies that you're going to have all this extra follow-up work to do, whatever the situation is. Right. And then I'm going to sit here and like tell you how dumb my boyfriend is. I don't care. I'm sorry. That makes me sound like such a jerk. And I think about that a lot, of like how that boundary can feel to people who are like having a hard time with their boyfriend. But I remind myself that I think about this because I looked it up yesterday. There are 620,000 people in Louisville, and I'm just one of them that you could call. Like, there's 620,000 people that are alive that you could vent to. And I'm only one person.
Right.
So, yeah, please, please, please always ask for consent. Especially if you're going to be like, hey, do you think my cousin has schizophrenia? Like, before you ask me that question, ask for consent if you can ask me that question.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, also just don't assume that every mental health professional knows how to diagnose schizophrenia also. Like,
that's a whole other...
Yeah, like, if one of my friends was like, hey, I think my cousins might have schizophrenia or BPD, and can I talk to you about it? I'm going to be like, well, I don't know enough to, like, tell you yes or no, and also, I'm not going to... No, thank you.
Goldwater rule. I love the Goldwater rule for that reason.
The what rule?
The Goldwater rule means that I'm legally not allowed to issue any diagnosis or discuss a diagnostic term for anyone I haven't formally evaluated.
Yes, yeah.
And so it's such a great cop-out. You know?
It is.
I love that. Yeah, but I think that's a great like way to describe it to friends too, is like ask for consent to do that, because in addition to me just not always having the energy to give you what you need at this time, like I also at a certain point it's like getting to a place where it's like I should be charging for this because I have hairdresser friends and esthetician friends and things like that, and I'm like, if I went to you to get a service from you, you would expect to be paid, and I can't be your therapist, but at a certain point it's like I have given you way too much to the point where now I feel like I'm at work and I'm not just talking to a friend and like give me $100.
Yeah. No, I think that it is. So one of my friends was talking to me about this one time, and I was like, that really stuck with me. Really interesting point about how it is such a thing of the patriarchy to assume that because somebody is being in a helping profession or helpful, that should be free. There's an aspect of that's a patriarchal message, that all help is less useful or less authentic if it's not free. And you would, again, esthetician, all those other professions, like you wouldn't expect that service for free.
Right.
But I get a lot of people who assume that I'll answer questions specifically about autism, and they will say, do you think I have autism? Do you think my brother has autism? Do you think, and I was like, oh, here's the thing. If you do, it's not my business. And I know that makes me sound, I hear myself sound like a turd as I say that, but that's better than leaving that resentful or just me being someone who doesn't go to public spaces because I hate that so much. Right. And so now I'm isolated and not getting my needs met, and therefore not even able to provide the services for the people that are paying me for them.
Yeah.
Because
but it's not
burnout.
It's not rude to have that boundary. Like people put boundaries on this weird thing of like, oh no, boundaries are rude. And it's like, no, the only people who are going to push back against your boundaries are the people who want to exploit you.
People who benefit from you not having them. Yeah.
So you guys do a lot of myth busting, and I wanted to ask you guys a question. I'm flipping the switch now.
That's okay. Let's do it.
Flipping it. What are your all's thoughts on these two big myths, which are everywhere in our industry? The myth of the miracle cure and the myth of the quick fix.
I need you to explain them.
Okay. So the miracle cure is you could either get this from a therapist or you could get it from a package of mushroom powder or whatever. The miracle cure is like, this will fix every aspect of your mental health. Like after 2 weeks, you will feel amazing. It will cure PTSD. That's the miracle cure, is this sense of like, well, the myth of the miracle cure and the quick fix are very wrapped up into each other because they're usually within one breath. But people will do it about their modality. So, if you do this, it'll feel like a magic wand has been waved over your brain. That's actually in some people's bios, that statement. So not just in our industry where it's a clinician doing it, but like where there's a product, like the Calmago product. I've had clients that really liked it, but if you read it, it's the packaging says this cures post-traumatic stress disorder.
No, thank you. Incorrect.
Yeah, where's the research on that, please?
Well, deep breathing is really beautiful and helpful and awesome, but you can't really guarantee that the whole structure of the Calmago, it looks like a inhaler. I hope they don't like get mad at me for talking about it. Actually, I don't care if they do. It looks like an inhaler, and it has like a little thing that has an essential oil on it, but it helps you kind of remember to breathe deeply.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because that's what it's really, because you've got this thing that's in your bag or whatever, and you put it, and I've had at least one, if not like 2 or 3, that have really enjoyed it, because it made them think through, like, I am stopping what I'm doing and I am breathing and I can smell something.
So we're setting an intention
grounding.
and we're grounding.
Yeah.
That's good.
But what it promises that it does is comical. I mean, and incorrect. You know what I mean? It will, and
Yeah, that's a very small part of PTSD, and how does that help you think about your trauma differently, or learn about how to trust people? Like, that's a very, very tiny part of PTSD.
But I've noticed that there's a lot of this other industry that's similar to ours struggles with this so much, the nutrition industry. This is, eggs are evil, eggs are the best, carbs are the devil, carbs are the best. Like, everybody needs to drink 8 gallons of cow's milk a day. I'm really exaggerating right now.
Yeah. I would die.
I would crap my pants so bad. No,
but
thank you.
there's so much that when I looked at how that was happening in how that shows up in the nutrition industry, I was like, now I had the template for how it shows up in our industry, only it's a little bit different in our industry. And a lot of times it's product based, but sometimes the things that therapists are promoting, and the things that they're saying they can accomplish with you, and there's just like a wild overpromise.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because sometimes people come to us and they're kind of tired of doing like the work of even just getting out of bed at all.
Right. Yeah.
And so when you come on real strong, like, oh, you're going to just like leap out of bed and you're going to just love your life. I don't know that anyone's coming on that strong
it feels
in
like
person
and
verbals, but like there are just a lot of, I just feel like I see a lot of weird promises.
You know what makes me think of? The first therapist I ever went to, like, was hardcore into CBT. And I'm neurodivergent and have some trauma going on, and CBT was not going to fix that. Because, like, my brain is literally different. Yeah, and I was very activated. So CBT, I'm supposed to think it. Basically, she pitched it to me as think yourself out of your situation. And I'm like, I'm actively living in this situation. I can't think my way out of it. So, no. And then she just kept trying to use it in different ways and like over and over for different goals. And I was just like, it got more and more and more resistant every time we had some kind of thought exercise-esque thing. And so like that kind of reminds me of people who are like a little too diehard into their modality or like their training that they've done. It's like you can't use it for everybody. But it works for people for sure. Yes,
it works for people when they're in a space where they're not as activated, because then they have the capacity to think things through. But if someone, I think about it this way, like if I'm pulling somebody out of a fiery building, I'm not going to be like, hey, will you do this calculus problem real quick? And like that's how CBT can feel to people who are super activated. And I think CBT, and I also think CBT can be so amazing when somebody, and it can actually be really helpful for trauma, but not when you are being like not when you're in that state, because you're just not able to think your way through your, and in the use disorder community, they say like, my best thinking got me here, which I think in some ways is a little rude, to be real, but it's also rude because it's kind of true. There's another one that they say a lot of times of like, my head is a dangerous neighborhood, I cannot go there alone. I think that, because my thoughts aren't great. And so like if I go there alone and then I am having I don't know, that I think there's just this, definitely this obsession that people get with what they do, that really limits them from being able to see the person in front of them. Really, it completely incapacitates them from seeing, like, and I know I've been addicted, or not addicted to that, but a victim of like modality religiosity, which is where you almost turn, you're so excited about what you do and you have a lot of passion, but then you get too excited about what you're doing instead of who that person is.
Well, and then you get the one, like, because when I worked at an agency, we were taught, we had to use evidence-based modalities, which is fine, but then it's like we were taught trauma-focused CBT and parent-child interaction therapy, and like I like both of those, but they were very much like, and you have to do it to fidelity every single time. It has to be exactly the same way, and it's like, okay, but then what if they need something else? Like I'm not allowed to like veer off of the protocol because otherwise I'm not doing fidelity, and then we're gonna lose our funding. Like, that's a lot of pressure.
That gets kind of into the weird, like, the BC, what's it called? Behavioral analysis realm of things. Where it's like the metaphor I hear all the time is like the client is like clay, and you're just putting your hands and you're shaping that clay and you're not going to move. It kind of gets into that realm of thinking. But then, like, I mean, people as clay has been a metaphor for a very long time, but I don't think it's accurate because
or human sound.
Because we're not literally made of clay. We're people with brains and stuff, like so that metaphor can only go so far. But I think, I don't remember where I was going with this. The BCBA stuff, it kind of gets into that realm of like, you have to do it this way. Eventually that it will work for them if you just only do it this rigid way. And it's like, nope, it doesn't work. I do a lot with like DBT, although when I'm around people who practice DBT, I'm not necessarily like hateful towards them or anything, but sometimes they start talking and I'm like, what are you talking about? Because they're so tending to be guilty of modality religiosity. They're so obsessed with DBT that they can't see anything other than like, that's like this close to their face and that's all they can see. And the big thing that happens all the time is like a client will be working with a therapist who doesn't have any experience with a specific disorder, and with that they'll be like, oh, the best thing for that is DBT, and so they'll be like, you need to go to this provider. Well, they may have already tried DBT and said, I'm not really a big fan, because a lot of DBT therapists are very worksheet oriented. And they might be like, I just don't gel with that, like I need this, I know what has worked a little bit. And sometimes, again, they could be biased or they could whatever, but that there's a long history in our field
of people being like, nope, you have to. And that part of that could be because the first therapist is like too overwhelmed by that diagnosis, or like doesn't feel trained enough, which is valid, right? We're allowed to say that like this is not a good fit.
Yeah.
But a lot of it is because we've been trained that that's the only modality that can work with that diagnosis. And I'm here to say that that's not true. You know, like there's beautiful research. Yes, DBT is amazing. But if someone's telling you that that's not what they want, it's their choice. It's you know what I mean? And even if they're wrong, quote unquote, because they get to learn that lesson on their own. Right. There's just this really weird, like, really weird stuff with that. And like, yeah. And as somebody who provides DBT, I don't do the 4 components that makes you like very, very official, where you have like group. To be like official, you have to run your own groups. You have to have individual. You have to do phone coaching, and you have to do consultation. And so I'm really upfront. I never like make it out to be like I'm running all 4 of those things, and then you get in with me, and then I'm not. I'm like, no, I don't do all. I just do individual.
Yeah.
But I definitely incorporate a lot of the philosophy aspect of it too, not just the skills. Yeah. But I turn a lot of the skills into art therapy. I combine art therapy with DBT a lot. And it makes it, because a lot of my clients are like, girl, I don't want to be doing no worksheets.
Right. Don't make me memorize more acronyms.
Yeah, and I'm like, you don't need to. We have art therapy versions of everything that we're doing.
Yeah.
You know, so.
And DBT, I feel like DBT is so easy to turn those worksheets into art therapy interventions. It's so easy.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't take. And then also with clients, like neurodivergent clients, worksheets might not just, they just don't make sense sometimes.
Yeah.
Like if I see a worksheet with an acronym, I'm like, I know I'm going to forget that. Unless I get it like tattooed on my body, I'm going to do the worksheet and it'll be gone. Object permanence doesn't exist anymore. It's gone. But if I make an art piece about it using a completely different part of my brain, then I will remember it and have more significance.
Yeah. I like the one where, okay, so approval doesn't equal acceptance. I always have like a paper, like construction or whatever, and have them like vent out all the disapproval. These are all the things I disapprove about. Whether I'm writing it, drawing it, or, I mean, when I do this for myself, I'm like, I'm spilling coffee beans all over it and smashing them into the page. You know what I'm like? I'm making it nasty because I disapprove. And he give you all this time and space to vehemently disapprove of it. And then in your mind, you get the opportunity over time, when you're ready, to acknowledge that acceptance is separate. And so then now show me the acceptance side. But it's not like I can just snap my fingers and you're like, I accept it, right? Like there's this, we really have to have that time and space for the disapproval piece. And I feel like while I love CBT, and I think CBT is a brilliant, amazing modality for a lot of different people, I think what CBT can often miss is that time and that space to disapprove. And like that's what makes people feel invalidated when they're like, oh, well, that's not logical, so just don't be doing that.
Yeah. It's like, well, that's not how that works in my brain.
I tried that. I actually tried just not doing it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's how therapists get caught up in CBT traps, because they're like, I know it's not logical in my brain. I've done the CBT. I've done the questioning of my own thoughts, and I still feel shitty.
Yeah.
Sometimes I get clients who come in and like they've been to therapy before, yada yada, and they're like they get the self-aware label from their past therapist, and so that's how they graduated out of therapy. And then they come to me and they're like, this is like my presentation about myself in therapy and everything that I've worked on and done, but nothing's working still. And so I'm like, okay, so let's not do any of that and do something else. Like if you intellectualize yourself so hard that it's still not working, then stop doing that thing and let's try something else. Let's stop intellectualizing our brain problems and try working with our brain problems, or try
being curious,
just figuring out where they come from. Being curious about like what are they and when do they happen, like, because it's not out of nowhere. I hear that all the time. I had a panic attack out of nowhere the other day. Like, I don't think so. You didn't go 0 to 60. You were cruising at 59 for 7 straight days. Like, there's a reason you had that panic attack. It wasn't out of nowhere. It just felt like it. Yeah.
Yeah. But in general, like, yeah, going back to your original question about miracle cures and quick fixes, yeah. I guess I haven't like heard that exact phrasing. So, but now that I'm thinking about it, people often ask me for quick fixes, especially parents. They're always like, well, how many sessions are we going to be here so that I can like budget out? I'm like, I understand the budgeting part, and you know, we'll work with that, but like, I don't know.
This isn't space camp.
It's very, I don't know your kid yet, and like I don't know how long it's gonna take, and also I don't know how hard you're gonna work, and how much you're gonna buy into what I have. So I can't give you a number of sessions, and I can't even guarantee that if I gave you a number of sessions that you would feel better and that it would stick for however long. But so that's really hard. But I did have a therapist when I was in high school. I saw a therapist like 2 times, and she literally brought out a magic wand, like a physical magic wand.
What?
And she was like, yeah, she was like an older lady, and my very first session with her, she pulled out like a sparkly magic wand, and she was like, I'm gonna fix you. And I was like, lady, I'm 17. Like, do not pull out a magic wand.
She said, I'm gonna fix you?
Yeah. And I was very depressed, and I was like, okay, I don't know how to tell you that you're a crazy lady, but like, okay, whatever. And then she focused all, like, the 3 sessions that I saw her, she was just focused on, like, you need to exercise. I was like, I don't.
Oh my God.
Don't want to. Yeah.
Whoa. That's Jesus Christ.
The
That's
magic
so much.
wand. I love that. Well, I don't love that happened to you. So let me start off with like, that's bananas. I feel like what she may have been like just devil's advocate in me, right? Is that maybe she was trying to like be cute and like make it less like formal, but I just don't know if she knew what 17 years old, like
right.
What. And also that's going straight to what we're talking about though, of the myth of the miracle. Like, you cannot show up like a god and like, I don't know. I always tell people too, they're like, well, what do I do about this? And they're really frantic about asking me. I'm like, well, the whole point of this process is for you to start like trusting you. And like, I'm more interested in you getting to experiment with your judgment and to know, and to get back to a space where like you feel like you can trust your own choices. And so I'm just so much more interested in that aspect of it. And I do think that there's like this power thing. There is this like that happens. I don't know if it's like the office chair or the couch or the like or the letters behind her, whatever. But I'm like always there. A lot of times when I feel that, I just get on the floor. Like, they might be on the couch and I might just be sitting on the floor, and they're like, you know, like we're still looking at each other. They're looking down, but I'm like, I'm not gonna show up as like. Because I've had that happen to me. I've had that, like, power trip happen to me before. So, like, I'm really worried about power a lot of times. I feel like that's something that shows up for me a lot. Maybe I've had people tell me, like, you might be too worried about that. But I would rather be too worried about that than not worried enough and show up as, like, the dictator in somebody's life. I always say that to my clients, too. I'm like, I'm not the czar of your life, and I never want you to feel that way. And, like, I always want you to feel very, like, disagree with me. I'm like not offended by that at all. I just, please do. You know what I mean? I'm not here to be. I don't have a lot of ego around what I do. Like, I really don't. I know that like I spend a lot of time talking about what I do, and like, I don't know, it's a big part of my life, but I know I'm not for everybody. If somebody wants that like person who's like in a button up with like perfectly, you know, manicured hair or whatever, I don't even know, that's gonna just like cross their legs and nod and like they're not gonna like me at all. Do you want
Sigmund Freud? Because you're not getting it.
Well, yeah, and I'm like, and that's totally fine, and that's available to you. It's just not here.
Yeah.
So I feel like it took me a while to get there because I had people telling me like the opposite for a while.
Yeah. I always hear like, well, you need to present yourself as an authority and you need to make sure that they know that you know what you're talking about. It's like, I can do that, but also be approachable and friendly and accept that, like, not everybody's gonna agree with everything that I say. But yeah, when your first job is like going into people's homes and saying like, you have to have this therapy, otherwise you're gonna have some big consequences. That's how they taught us how to do it, is to be like, I'm the expert, and even though I'm a 25-year-old childless person, you need to listen to me.
That's such a weird dynamic. I think they're trying to fix that a lot now, or shift that, where they just throw really young clinicians into like ridiculous situations. I think they are trying to really fix that, but they should be fixing it a little faster.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you want to talk about?
Do you have questions about us? Because we were making you talk a lot.
Well, I just really needed to know what your favorite foods are.
Okay, yes.
And your number one favorite hobbies.
I rotate through hobbies like ridiculously fast. Not even fast. I just rotate through hobbies a lot because I have ADHD. And I need that novelty and that dopamine constantly. But right now, it's D&D has been my hobby. I don't have a group that I have a campaign with anymore because scheduling is really, really hard and it's just kind of impossible. But I've been listening to like a ton of podcasts where people are playing D&D, and there's a show called Dimension 20 that I've been watching. They play D&D, and that's kind of been what I've been a little obsessed about lately.
Nice.
And I'm even trying to like pull D&D stuff into sessions with the teenagers I work with.
Yeah.
Because a lot of them play D&D, but it's the same thing where like they can't get their friends to commit to playing, or they don't have enough people to play. Yeah, it is. So I was kind of like, I've been pulling in like D&D things like hit points and like your vulnerabilities, things like that into session. And now I'm playing around with an idea for like group therapy, but we play D&D. So it doesn't feel like group therapy.
That'd be cool.
And they get to like hang out with other teenagers and like socialize,
you can do
because
so
they
much
don't
parts
do that.
work with that.
Oh, I know.
It's perfect for parts work.
Yeah. So playing around with that idea.
If you do
Yeah.
that, you have to let me know. If it's adults, if you ever do an adult one, I have
that's
many adults.
I'll probably
that will
start
need
with
that.
adults just because it's a little easier that way. And a lot of them have already played D&D. So they kind of know how it works, versus trying to teach teenagers where some of them have played, some of them don't. That might be a little harder. But yeah, that's been my obsession lately. It's like, I keep thinking when I listen to podcasts, I'm like, ooh, that would be such a good therapeutic opportunity if they like talked about this with that character just now. So that's what I've been obsessed with.
That is so perfect for parts work. And you know, I do think one of the things that can be hard about starting a group is that the first time you run a group, you don't necessarily like make as much, because it's like you kind of have, you know what I mean? You have to like kind of work through the kinks. Well, and I think there's a lot of like weird stuff that goes into it that's different than individual when you're in a private practice setting. That you have to kind of get used to, and you have to be, I don't know, there's a lot of people that kind of like want you to do it for free, and then like don't understand that like then you won't even break even, and that you have to feed your family. There's a lot of that aspect of it can be kind of challenging the first time through. So what I always talk to people about who are like, I don't know if I want to do a group or not, is like just lower the expectations on that first go around. Think of that as like a practice run for like how you're gonna do the culture. Just because that piece of it's really challenging. We did me and Melissa did the mindful self-compassion group. It was art therapy and mindful self-compassion, and it actually went really well. But because somebody had given me the advice that I just said, that helped me manage expectations about like the nuts and the bolts and like the finer details. Like just know that next time you do it, you'll be like, oh, I'm gonna do it this way and that way instead of that way. But
Cool. It's like when I was taught for a while, so it reminds me of when I was teaching too, because I would have like my lesson plan like down to the millisecond, and of course shit would hit the fan every time. So then I learned, I was like, you have a lesson plan where it's like the subject and the thing you want to work on, and then you just make it work.
Well, and then like 4 kids lost a tooth, and then
someone barfed in the trash can, or like half the class is like on a field trip and stuff like that would happen. I'm like, well, we can't do this thing that I planned because we need more than 8 people to learn this thing, so we can do groups, but whatever, we'll make it work.
For sure.
Yeah, good flexibility, learning flexibility.
So what about food?
Oh, food. I was just very excited to talk about Dungeons & Dragons.
Yeah, no, it's always welcome.
This is very specific, my dad's spaghetti. He makes the best spaghetti sauce, and he has tried to teach me how to make it, and I can never make it the same way he does, because he must put like either drugs or magic in it, because I can't.
It's magic.
But it's that's a
he
lot
has
nicer
a
than what
magic
I was
wand.
thinking. It's like, what's that green stuff in the pasta sauce? Because I don't think it's actually oregano. I think you're putting something else in my spaghetti. But that's my favorite food. Has been my favorite food since childhood. I've never strayed from it, but it sucks because I can only eat it when my dad makes it and invites me over to eat. So I don't get it as often as I would like. But that's probably why it's my favorite. It's a novelty food now. So, cool. Yeah, good stuff.
Mine is movie theater popcorn, like fresh
Whoa.
movie theater popcorn. I have gone to the movie theater and just walked in and gotten popcorn and then taken it home.
Wow. So there's something magical about the movie theater popcorn versus regular.
It's I love microwaved popcorn too, but movie theater popcorn
That's so weird.
Different.
I've never been like a popcorn person, but weirdly last week I started becoming more of a popcorn person, and then I met another popcorn person. So like, what are the odds?
I'm pretty picky about my like it has to be hot.
Yeah.
Popcorn. Like I'm not getting the bags of
pre-done
cold popcorn. I don't do kettle corn. I don't like mixing sweet and salty. So if I expect it to be salty, it needs to be salty.
Yeah.
I mix the cheddar and the caramel together.
No, I can't do it.
So
she
good.
would die.
I can't do it. It's gotta just butter. Just butter, that's
You
it.
broke her heart.
Well, yeah.
I mean, you do whatever you want with your popcorn, but don't touch mine.
I love food that is that is salty and sweet at the same time.
Yes,
I
that
love
I
it.
do. That
It's
is.
not my thing.
Well, have you had those little chocolates that have like
The
pellets
sea
of
salt
salt
stuff?
on top of them? I mean, whoever invented that?
Yep.
Genius.
Or like salt, like what are they called? Mocha lattes that are like salted on top. I love it.
I actually, so this is another thing that's like funny about like working with people with autism, is like I actually really enjoy people's stories about what they hate. You know what I mean? Like you, like I love that whole like the vehement, intense. No, popcorn has to be done correctly. Like kind of. I don't know if you guys watch Schitt's Creek, but kind of like
love Schitt's Creek.
David's energy about like this is correct and
Yes.
this is incorrect. And I've had people tell me like such a large variety of things that they don't like that are just like, in all honesty, are just innocent things. Like it might be the texture of corduroy, it might be, but the looks.
Yeah.
I just want to make like an assortment. I have such a visual mind that I can recall like you know what I mean? Like my recall for a visual is really, really high, and I can just see the just the utter disgust about such a long line of like really, really, really innocent items.
Yeah.
And I love that. Like that's why I love that population, and that's such a big piece of it too, is that you know, you get this, I don't know, I just feel like you get this opportunity to unravel a lot of societal expectation stuff, especially for a lot of people that I work with who are like very late diagnosed. And that is just brilliant to be able to like witness the unraveling. and to be able to be like, what you're at, the accommodation you're asking for is unreasonable. And I will tell you if you're asking for a unreasonable. And I have had people be like, this is reasonable. I should be able to be a sales rep at AT&T and go in pajama pants. And I'm like, no, you shouldn't.
Actually,
like,
you can't.
you
Yeah.
shouldn't be able to do that, because that's too far. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But like, we can also look at work from home job. You know, like that would be. I'm so here for like the accountability process of like I could call somebody out lovingly, you know, like compassionate accountability for in a timely manner, not like when they're like activated or right. But like at the same time, I love the unraveling of like, yeah, if you want to sit on the floor, if you want to, you know, in this setting where you could just do your notes this way, or you could, you know what I mean? Like, then I'm the first person that can model that so that you know, like, you're not hurting anybody. And like, all those rules are stupid.
Right. Yeah.
But like, if you want to go to a movie theater and scream from the top of your lungs because you just suddenly feel the need to scream, we're going to have a conversation about how like that's not really fair to everyone else.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. We can do that in another way that still achieves that goal or that need.
Well, I'm going to plug your website.
Marvelous.
It's what is it again?
FitzKingTherapy.com.
.com, yeah.
It's hard to remember sometimes.
FitzKingTherapy.com. It's got information about Braxton's Bill and the play, which is
asking
toddlers to do algebra. And it has all your information if you want to be a client, all the stuff. Get on there. Is there anything else that you want to plug?
No, that's it.
Okay.
Well, just People Advocating Recovery.
So give that a look over. Subscribe to our podcast. And tell your friends. And tell us, what should they comment this week?
You give me this pressure every
Sorry.
time.
On the spot.
You should expect it by
But
now.
I think of really... I do think of some out-of-pocket things, too, though, which is fun. I want to know what it's not October, but I want to know what your favorite Halloween candy is. And I also want to know what your favorite Halloween costume is that you've ever done.
Can I ask for a comment?
Yeah.
Okay. So I want to know what you think is like the funniest miracle cure promise that we can make fun of together.
Yeah.
Even if it's just like like it doesn't have to be mental health related. It could be like, oh yeah, the My Pillow guy, he promises that he's gonna cure all your migraines. I don't know if you know
and then
that,
he takes your money and
yeah. No,
cool.
For sure.
That's a good one. Miracle cures, favorite Halloween candy costume.
Yeah.
Whatever you feel. Yep. And then join us again next week.
We don't know what we're doing, but it's fine.
We'll figure it out.
Yep. All right. Have a good week.
Bye.
Bye.